На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. We're joined this week after what was one of the most entertaining and by far the highest scoring game weekend in the RPL of the 2020-2021 season so far. To join me, it's just the two of us. It's myself and Richard Pike.
Good evening, James. How are you?
I'm not good. Let's get it straight out from there. Let's go. I think everyone will know why. Obviously, is the resident Spartak fan, but Spartak were defeated. Oh no, sorry, Spartak weren't defeated. Zenit won 7-1 in the game against Spartak at the weekend. To quickly, before we do discuss the game, I'll just go through some statistics that resulted from the match itself. It is the heaviest domestic defeat in Spartak history, joint heaviest domestic. That's in their entire history as well. It is the heaviest in RPL history. The heaviest loss of Rui Vitoria's career. The most goals conceded by Spartak in 3 consecutive matches, which is at 13. Spartak have now just got 2 wins in the last 15 games against Zenit. That includes 7 Zenit wins as well. And in that time, 33 Zenit goals against just 18 of Spartak. And it's just 5 wins in the last 28 meetings between the two for Spartak. From the Zenit end, Artyom Zuba is now the joint top goal scorer in RPL history. And Sardar Azmoun also broke a similar record as he's the joint top, or leveled a similar record rather, as he's now the joint top foreign goal scorer in RPL history. It was pretty much the Magnificent Seven for Zenit, while you'd think that Spartak are probably more so like 7 psychopaths after that game. Richard, how did you think it went down? I think it's going to be pretty obvious to see where a lot of the conversation lies with probably that Spartak defence.
Well, yeah, I mean, Zenit obviously had those 2 slip-ups, didn't they, against Arsenal, Tula and against Sochi. I mean, the Sochi game was conditioned by the red card to Sardar Azmoun, which I never thought was a red card. I thought they were a bit unlucky with that one. But yeah, if ever there was a result to define the superiority of Zenit in the league at the moment over the other sides, then this was it. It was a very good performance from them, very complete. Sardar Azmoun had a great game. Claudinho continued his good form. 2 in midfield, Wendell and Barrios continue on really strongly. I have to say, even though we'll get on to Spartak in a minute with my analysis, that for some of the goals that Zenit scored were brilliant. The second one from Claudinho, there was absolutely nothing that Spartak could do about that. It was just a sensational strike from what looks to be a very, very good player. He just seems to improve time over, with every game.
Yeah,
and I really enjoyed Azmoun's. To be fair to Azmoun, that first goal, even though Rakitsky could have been closed down for the cross, he did very, very well to target Ayrton Lucas when jumping, because obviously as a striker, he's taller than Lucas, who's a full-back stroke wing-back. So classic centre-forward play, get on the wing-back stroke full-back and head the ball home. And I think he did. I think Zuba did that for the 7th goal as well on Raskazov. But yeah, we've got to get on to the Spartak horror show. It was just dreadful, wasn't it? And so soon after the calamitous performance against Leicester in the Europa League after being 2-0 up, just another horror show. And you could definitely tell during the game that Zenit were targeting the right channel of Spartak in the 3 at the back formation. They were targeting Maximiliano Corfrier and Nikolai Raskazov's side, and yeah, it's such a weak point for Spartak in the defence. And the 4th goal was just it was just dreadful, wasn't it? I think Corfrier played, I think it was Mostovoy on side. and then curiously, when he rounds Maximenko Mostovoy to slot home, Corfrier is almost slowly running back. To me, he should be absolutely pegging it to get back on the goal line, because when Mostovoy's rounded the keeper, he's just going to put it anywhere at the goal. He's not even going to try and place it. He's going to put it anywhere at the goal. Just bust a gut to run back, but he was just very slow getting back there. He might not have got it anyway, but he should have been really busting a gut to get back there. And then later on in the game, after after I think Claudinho stole in ahead of Raskazov to I think it might have been Maximenko who made the save. It bounced to Kulfrey in the box and he just took down Azmoun in the box. It was a clear penalty, and then got his second yellow card. His first yellow card was for a blatant shit pull on Wendell in midfield. Let's just say he's not looked very good so far. Definitely doesn't look like a Spartak quality player. Raskazov just carries on getting exposed. I think for the fifth goal, I've forgotten who scored the fifth goal, but it came from the left side. Lucas was beaten with a cross in the box. I think it was from Karavayev, and then Raskazov just got
again.
Yeah, Mostovoy again. Yeah, and then Raskazov just got outpaced by Mostovoy, and he tapped in at the near post, at the post he was at, and just a disastrous performance from Spartak, and more of the same problems that we were starting to see at the beginning of the year, starting to emerge now after they went on a little mini revival. Yeah. It's only a mini revival. It's now been well and truly shut down, and already the chances of qualifying for Europe for next season looking slimmer by the day. But a fantastic win by Zenit to underline their superiority and leave anyone in no doubt as to who the favourites for the title are this season.
It's a little depressing from a Spartak point of view that you actually lost count of how many goals they scored during the game. But I will want to preface anything that I say about the game by, while I'm going to be berating Spartak as a Spartak fan, I mean, this is a fan site. We're not journalists. We are just fans of the RPL. Speaking for myself there, at least. I do want to preface firstly that Zenit were absolutely outstanding on the day. Claudinho's goal was brilliant. Mostovoy and Azmoun, the braces, they were everywhere. Wendell just controlled and dictated everything in midfield. The only downside was the fact that Spartak actually managed to score through Promes, and maybe the early injury to Douglas Santos. I think he's probably the most consistent player in the entirety of the RPL. He's just a solid 7 out of 10 every single game at the very least. So hopefully he was obviously replaced quite early by Daniil Klugovoy. Hopefully that's not too bad of an injury for him and Zenit, particularly with some very, very difficult games and a big run-in coming in before Christmas. It was just... What really impressed me about Zenit was their ability in behind Spartak. They're using the space behind the defensive line and Spartak's own high pressing and high defensive line against them. Obviously, the game against Leicester was very much not just setting off alarm bells from Spartak's point of view, but any Zenit scout watching that must have just been licking the lips, knowing that Samu Gijo was out, who's one of Spartak's key defenders. Maximilian Alcorfrier had to come in for him. So at that point, you knew that Raskasov would be starting at right centre-back, flanked alongside by a less experienced, not as talented defender. And as you said, Richards, Corfrier and Raskasov are probably the two worst players on the pitch, followed not far by Alexander Maximenko. And it's Zenit just continually took advantage of that. I think it was after the game in the press conference, Semak actually said something along the lines of that the plan was to keep hold of the ball early on and just keep things quite solid early on, knowing that Spartak would get at them and fly out the traps. That's exactly what happened. But I think in the early stages of the game, Zenit didn't really control much of the ball. I think they only had like 40 to 50% possession at home, obviously, against Spartak. That was... And then after that, once they got the first goal, they just absolutely flew out the traps. Promes, Sobolev and Larson were just ineffective, totally marshalled by Chistyakov and Lakitsky in particular. And they usually, and because of, to try and nullify Spartak's attack, Semak set his three up in like quite an aggressive stance. He pushed them much higher up than what you would usually see. not just by Rakitsky and Lovren, but also Chistyakov. That was the main difference. When you see quite a lot of Rakitsky and Lovren or whoever it is on the right of Zenit's three pushing quite high to progress the ball. But it was Chistyakov also pushed very high up and put a squeeze on Sobolev, and it just took any form of outlet that Spartak tried to input onto the game early on totally out of it. When they were in possession, it kind of morphed into like a 4-2-3-1, as you would expect. They would all step up. Douglas would go up and support Barrios, and Wendell would move up the pitch even further, and Rakitsky would kind of shift around from centre back to left back, as he always does, where he's really good at just pushing the ball up and progressing from central defence. And I thought it was just while early, the first 5 minutes or so, it was quite standard Zenit. It was a tactical decision to stay like that and then ramp it up and become super aggressive. And this aggression really, really highlighted Spartak's weaknesses. And obviously that weakness is in behind, like you said, Richard, that right-hand Spartak's right flank, exposing that pace, exposing in behind, getting Azmoun running in. That's why Azmoun started and not Zuba. It's horses for courses. And he's absolutely brilliant at exposing smaller defenders who are not good in the air. I mean, he's aerially brilliant anyway, and particularly making runs off the shoulder. And I thought Zenit were excellent at that all of the game. It puts Rui Vitória in a little bit of a difficult position because one of the main sort of traits that you've seen from Vitória in Spartak's early time, especially in the pre-season, obviously it's only pre-season, so pinch of salt there, but was how he organised the defence. Tedesco famously kind of had Spartak all attacking, but a little bit of a glass cannon, very, very weak at the back. So Vitória initially tried to shore things up. He dropped the team down. He increased the compactness over the entirety of the side. It was designed more to put not as much pressure on the ball, but more so leave space, fill the spaces in between, which is in following his own defensive principles that he's had at Benfica and everywhere else that he's been. Under Tedesco, the wing-backs broke the line with really high positions, even against teams that would play a back four. Free spaces would then arise behind these wing-backs. In the last week or so, even longer, a month maybe, we've seen more of that. Spartak have actually had better results until the last 4 games than they started under Vitória. They had a nice little run going together. But that in doing that, they became more attacking. They pushed higher up. They lost that compactness. And when they're now playing the 3, it's very similar to the Tedesco one, where they would push on and the wing-backs would push on high. Moses is always attacking. He's always looking forward. Zayeten the same. And there would be these huge free spaces that would arise behind them. And that's exactly what Leicester took advantage of. It's exactly what Zenit took advantage of, even better. It was because of Zenit. I mean, it's wrong, Leicester's team was still good, but Zenit's aggression really highlighted Spartak's weaknesses for me. I'll stop monologuing now because I could probably be here all day talking about Spartak's defensive weaknesses. But I agree with you, Richard. I thought Claudinho's goal was brilliant, and that front 3 was just unplayable, even without Malcolm.
Super strike, wasn't it? So good.
What did you think of Mostovoy's performance? I know you've said that he scored 2 goals, but I think he was obviously taken off just towards the end, replaced by Alexis Satoman. But it looks like this year in general that he's really quite maturing as a player, even though, I mean, he's obviously only still 23, so lots of time to grow. And this is his first goals for quite some time, but you can just see in his performances that he's a lot less ball hungry, if that's the right word, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I've been impressed with him in the games that I've seen of Zenit. Obviously, he had that good loan spell at Sochi, didn't he? Maybe it took a year to adapt, but yeah, no, I've been impressed with him. He had a good game on Sunday. Yeah, just to echo what you've been saying, to echo what you said earlier, James, as well. Just want to say that, for as bad as Spartak were, I thought Zenit were outstanding. Even if Spartak had played better, I think Zenit would have just, still beaten them. They were right on it that Sunday. Fantastic performance from them. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they go into the match upcoming against Dinamo tomorrow. It should be an interesting game for them. It is at Zenit, and then they've got a big game in the Champions League away to Juventus. So big games coming up. I wonder, given Zuba's quite disappointing performance against Juve in the opening game, whether they might actually start Azmoun alongside Malcolm and Claudinho against Juve. Because I felt maybe one thing they lacked was a bit of pacing behind when they, Zuba isn't obviously the quickest, so I think they probably might start Azmoun in that game. But yeah, I say Mostovoy has done well. I've been impressed with him, and I've been impressed more with Simak. Has shown some tactical development this season, which has been good. He's reverted formation.
Certainly.
Yeah, I've liked it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it continues. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was Semak's tactics that... Zenit would have won that game the way they played, but Semak's tactics although Leicester was a blueprint, he identified how to attack that weakness even stronger, and that's what resulted in the 7 goals. It could come down to goal difference at the end of the season, European places, whatever. Probably not the league. I would expect Zenit to get that one up, but it was just the nature of the win. In the gloating that Zenit deserve from the performance is a lot of that down to his tactical decisions. I thought they won everything in midfield. I thought Wendell and Barrios were outstanding again in midfield. Wendell's really developing into becoming what you would see is like a real Zenit signing, like a Witzel sort of signing, if a little bit cheaper and maybe not at the same level, but he's developing further and he's younger as well. So really excited by him. I think Spartak's problem, yes, Riskasov is not good enough. Yes, there are issues in defence and the spaces that they're leaving behind. But I think a lot of their problems do come from midfield. They didn't replace Kral, and that was massive. Kral really did a lot of the water carrying, a lot of the groundwork, the dirty work, whatever you want to call it, or any of those aphorisms for their midfield last season. Jorrit Hendricks, obviously, isn't quite as good as him, but playing this tactic that Vitoria has now, where it's more aggressive, less compact, more attacking, requires real agility and stamina and discipline in that pivot. Spartak don't have that in consistently strong form right now. Ruslan Litvinov has performed well on and off, but he's arguably out of position and is certainly inexperienced. Zobnin isn't in the greatest of form. In my opinion, the best midfielder in their team this season, Nailum is out injured. And against fast-thinking players like Wendell, like Barrios, Spartak really struggle. It was the same problems emanated against Leicester when they had their defence with bloody Yuri Tielemans in, and we all know how good he is. They don't have the time to cover the ball. They don't think fast enough. They can't think fast enough against players of Tielemans, Wendell, and Barrios' quality. That's why they really struggled in these last 2 games, in my opinion. I think it does start at the midfield structure, and it kind of manifests from there. It particularly manifested itself in the Europa League, both against Leicester and Legia. They were caught on terrible counters, caught on the turn. Both midfielders were in both games. Even against Napoli, arguably 6 out of the 8 goals. In Europe, this has done that. Now, obviously in the RPL, these structural issues arise far less often. A lot of teams, because Spartak are good at pinning teams back, they're good at controlling teams in their opposition's final third. Against more defensive teams, you don't see that as much. The RPL is a defensive league, but when you play your Zenits, it really, really does show up, and they really do just get purely outclassed. Something needs to change, particularly in these games, the top of the table games, the ones against your Zenit, your Dinamo, CSKA, Krasnodar, whoever at the top right now. Or they'll continue to flounder in mid-table. There's rumours that Daniel Klusevic is joining Spartak. There's rumours that Vitoria is potentially changing his approach. I think that would be welcomed. I think he has to. I don't think he has a choice. But I'll finish that there on my end. Richard, anything else to say on the big game at the weekend?
Yeah, I want to echo your thoughts on Spartak's midfield, James. It is a huge issue for them. Kral obviously leaving is a huge blow, and Hendricks has not been brilliant since he arrived. He's done okay, but again, definitely nowhere near Kral's level. And I agree with you, they're missing Yarov in that midfield. Litvinov, promising young player, but you saw it at the weekend, the experience that the likes of Barrios and Wendell have compared to Spartak's midfield. And yeah, I agree. Zobnin slowly seems to be on the way down. Don't know whether injuries are starting to have an impact on him. I think with Kral, Spartak really should have handled that a little bit better. I think they should have said to Kral at the start of the year, at the summer, if you want to go, we prefer you to make a decision now. So because we're working with the foreigner limit, we have to try and get a replacement in. The fact that it was done so late, it just gives them so little time to get replacements in. And yeah, I mean, Klusevic is an interesting pickup for Spartak, but I think they definitely need to be looking at bringing in a midfielder soon. I definitely think that's an area of the squad where they need to strengthen. And to be honest, it's one of those things with Vittoria. He hasn't been brilliant so far, but let's just say Spartak were to try another coach, they're not going to get anybody decent till the summer. So you'd be getting a caretaker until the end of the season. Who knows where that might lead? Yeah, I think it's just a simple case. They've just got to ride it out till January and see what they can do with the squad then. Because until then, I just think Vittoria's pretty powerless to do anything really. But yeah, the midfield definitely, it was like men against boys in that midfield at the weekend. I think Zenit just totally overrun them in midfield with Barrios and Vendel. So that's an area of Spartak's squad which definitely needs to be addressed in the winter window.
Yeah, totally. I think I'm not a massive fan of Vittoria. I think he's a little bit dull. I've mentioned it before. I'll not go into it again. But I feel sorry for the bloke. He's been given a shed to build without a tool set nor any nails to put the shed together with. The summer was an absolute disaster, and that's not him. That's above his remit. I mean, whose remit is it? Because there's like a cavalcade of sporting directors joining and leaving at that place. Why? We all know why. Fadoon at the top. But it's just a mess, absolute mess, and it needs sorted out. And like you said, Richard, I agree. It's not going to be anything short term. I'll quickly finish on Zenit because I feel like I don't want to underestimate my thoughts on Zenit's performance and how good it was. I really liked Semak's comments after the game, where he said that regarding our tactical pattern, it was more convenient to play us with Serdar, so Zuba remained in reserve. It's a little bit alluding to what I said myself earlier. But basically, Zenit's counterattacks were just outstanding. Spartak could not cope with them whatsoever because of their own issues, but more so because of Zenit's own ability to carry them out. Vittoria wanted to play aggressive. He wanted to push high and press high up the pitch. But was that the correct thing to do against Zenit? When you assess the capabilities of Spartak squad comparatively to Zenit squad, individually and as a collective unit, it's just night and day. Zenit are far better in just about every single aspect throughout the pitch. It's a little bit like what Tedesco did himself, but I think he had his players playing better. He had a little bit more backing. He had Kral, which, like I said before, was a vital difference. Zenit were just absolutely brilliant. These sort of games often occur from, I don't know what the correct word is, not mistakes, but maybe mistakes, defensive mistakes, or freak incidents, or something like that, where you would see 7 goals, like a crazy own goal, or like a wicked deflection would get one, or like it would be like 3 or 4 numerous mistakes in a row. And it would be quite an even game aside from that sometimes. But this one was like genuine, absolute domination. I'll end by just saying that Zenit had 15 free kicks in and around Zenit's final third. An NPXG, which is expected goals not including penalties, of 3.72, which is huge, and 7 clear-cut scoring chances. All of those metrics are the highest in the league in any individual game this season. So it wasn't just Spartak's poor defending. It wasn't just mistakes on the Spartak end. It was an absolute domination by Zenit. And that's why the podcast is going to be called Their Magnificent Seven. It's one of the best RPL performances I've seen in quite some time. Probably since last time Zenit destroyed Spartak. It happens quite a lot. But I'll move on from Zenit and Spartak now and Richard, you've been keeping an eye on some of the other games this weekend. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go Dinamo or CSKA? We can do either one. David's not here. The cats are free.
I'll do CSKA actually because we didn't mention them on last week's pod. I've watched the last two games against Ural away and against Krylia at home, and they've picked up 2 wins. And they've slowly been climbing the table. I think they're actually up to 3rd now, CSKA, behind Dinamo and Zenit at the top. We all raised our eyebrows when Alexei Berezutsky was given the job in the summer, following on from Ivica Olic's short and unsuccessful spell in charge. He had a difficult start. I think they lost 2 of their first 3 matches. But in recent weeks, they've been improving. They got a 2-0 win away against Nizhny Novgorod before the international break, in addition to a 0-0 draw at home against Krasnodar. And their last 2 matches, as I mentioned, against Ural and against Krylia, they won. The Ural game was a classical, away performance. Just be solid at the back. Ural didn't particularly threaten a huge amount, but be solid at the back. Create chances, and eventually one will come your way, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, the goal was a little bit fortuitous the way it arrived. I think it was Obyakov who was trying a pass into the final third, and he didn't quite find his man, but it took a deflection off an Ural player and bounced straight into the path of Chidara Ijuke, who did a brilliant finish to slot it home into the corner, and that won them the game. I thought Jakub Biol was very good against Ural, a rock at the back for them. And I've got to say, I've got to take my hands off and admit, he was one of the players last year I didn't think, when he went out on loan to Hanover in the 2 Bundesliga, I didn't think he had much of a future at CSKA. But I will give him a lot of credit for turning it around. And I'll also give Alexei Berezutsky a lot of credit too for finding him a different position. Obviously, whenever I've seen him in those deep midfield roles, Jakub Biol, I've never really been that impressed with him. However, he has been very good at centre-back. He's pretty much played there the whole of the season so far, and it's been a successful conversion job by Alexei Berezutsky. He's partnered Igor Diveyev there some games. Diveyev was injured in the game against Ural and in the game against Krylia. He did not start. He was actually paired with Kirill Nababkin, and both of the pair of them held out quite well, admittedly against lower-end RPL opponents, but it was a makeshift back defensive too, because you'd think when both are fit and available, Bruno Fuchs and Igor Diveyev will be the starting centre-backs. But, a makeshift defence, got through the game perfectly well. And I thought Biol got man of the match from Match TV, which, highlighted, how good a game he played. Ijuke was very good too at drawing fouls, and he really came into his own in the game against Krylia. He was awarded man of the match in that game. I've got some stats actually which highlight his continuous improvement. He's really taken the mantelpiece, hasn't he, in recent weeks, especially from in CSKA from Nikola Vlasic's departure. He's suddenly now stepped up and become the star man. I've got some stats here from Ijuke. Compared to last season, last year he had 2.84 shots per 90 minutes. This year it's 3 shots per 90 minutes. Shots on target per 90 minutes. Last season, 1.14. So far this season, 1.2. Goals per shot last season, 0.1. This season, 0.13. So these are subtle improvements, but, they are an improvement, and we've still got quite a lot of the season to go. Already he's looking, a lot, just generally a lot better. Increased input in terms of goals, in terms of his overall play. He really is a delight to watch at times when he gets going. He's got that lovely turn of acceleration that allows him to get clear of defenders, and he can just take defenders on and, zip past them so easily. He's got good feet, and he's quickly become the star man in Vlasic's departure. And what I've also liked about Alexei Berezutsky in the game against Krylia was he tried 3 different formations. He started out with a 4-2-3-1. Ivan Obyakov, by the way, has been moved back to midfield in the last couple of games. Georgy Shenikov is back fit now, so hopefully he can stay fit and get a run of games, at least till the January window. I don't know whether they will carry on playing Shenikov there or whether they might invest in a new fullback, but it's better to see Obyakov in midfield, although he didn't do a particularly bad job at left back, to be fair. At least it shows he is versatile and can play there if that position ever needs looking at again. But yeah, nice to see Oblakov back in midfield. And he played a 4-2-3-1. They got back to 1-1 in the game. They fell behind due to Ivan Sergeyev goal for Krylia. And then, yeah, in the second half, halfway through the second half, he changed his formation. He brought, I think it was Fyodor Chalov on, and went two up front. So he went from a 4-2-3-1 to a 4-4-2 with a Duque and Zayutdinov out wide, and Chalov and Zabolotny up front. And then for his final move, he brought Alan Zagoyev onto the pitch and actually played a three at the back formation with Zagoyev as actually a centre half, a central defender who stepped out of the defensive line and played passes through. And it was actually one of these passes which found Chalov for CSKA's second of their 3 goals on 84 minutes. It was essentially the goal that won them the game. So it was good to see them switching the formation a couple of times in the second half. It was good to see that from Berezovsky, because when we watched CSKA's games last year under Olic, they didn't do any of that. It seemed like Olic just had one game plan, and that was pretty much it. Whereas it's nice to see a bit of tactical switching to win them the game. And it was interesting. I think Nicola Morrow briefly played as a third centre-back, I think, in one of the games against CSKA. I think it was either at the back end of last season or beginning of this season. Dinamo reverted to a back three and played Morrow was a player who can bring it out from the back and step out the defensive line and play passes through. So you wonder if Berezovsky took that on from the way Dinamo played against CSKA in that game. So yeah, good to see them coming up the table a little bit. Admittedly, the caveat is the 2 opponents that they played, not the highest quality of opponents. But, it will get tougher for them. I think the next 2 games are Rubin away. And trying to think who they've got next. And Sochi, Rubin and Sochi away in the next 2 games. So it will get tougher. But at least some steps in the right direction from Alexei Berezovsky and CSKA. I like Ilzas Akhmatov in this more advanced role. I think that suits him more. It's good to see him, finding solutions, with the Biol conversion into a central defender. They got a good win in the cup against Lipetsk. They're through now into the last 16, and Bruno Fuchs came on in that game as a substitute. I think Diveyev is now fully back fit again, so some positives for CSKA, and let's see what Berezovsky and CSKA can do in the upcoming weeks. But yeah, looks like they're turning around their season slowly over the last few weeks.
Yeah, certainly. I know what, I'm going to praise somebody that I didn't expect to praise ever in a CSKA shirt, and it's actually Anton Zabolotny up front. He scored again at the weekend. And what I think Zabolotny's doing well for CSKA, which they've missed for quite some time, is while he's got the odd goal here and there for them this season, but what I think he's doing really well is I think he scored what 3 goals this season, but he's in the league. He's doing the dirty work again, like what I said, what Kral did so well for Spartak, but at the other end of the pitch, he's bringing other players into the game. His ability back to goal is second to none in Russia, probably only better than by Zuba. And I think that's potentially why you're seeing Azuke partly helping Azuke move his game on, why Akhmatov's move to playing as a number 10 has worked so well, is Zabolotny's that physical presence that CSKA have been crying out for so long. They tried doing it with Abel Hernandez. Hernandez played all right, but wasn't really that physical presence that they looked for. Ilya Shkurin, again, didn't quite work out for him. And what he's really emulating now is what I thought they would get in Rondon this time last season. But Rondon just didn't perform well at all. He scored 4 goals in 10 games, but it was mostly penalties. And he just didn't show any of that drive, that power that he had last time at Zenit and Rubin. And then obviously when he moved to England and was a real target man and a real outlet up top. But Zabolotny's proving to be that so far. And the rest of the team, those around him, are really benefiting from it more so than he is himself. So credit to Zabolotny, because he became a little bit of a joke figure for a time, and maybe still is, but I think it's only so long that he can be a joke, and I think he deserves some credit there. I'll quickly discuss one game myself that I also watched, which was Akhmat Ural. Yes, I hear the cries of everybody listening is, why did you decide to watch Akhmat Ural? Well, I wanted to just see how Ural were doing. I haven't seen, like I said last week, I hadn't seen any of Ural this season because they were always on when more interesting games were taking place and more interesting teams were playing. So I decided to actively remedy that, and I wanted to see particularly how Kuzmichev and Adamov were playing down at the back. Obviously, Adamov has recently got his first call up for the national team, and they've just got some interesting players all around the side as well. Pomazun in goal, Leo Goglachidze, Kirill Koznichenko, and then some of the youngsters like Luka Gagnidze and Artyom Maximenko. Like they've got a real interesting crop of youngsters there, and unfortunately, they didn't have the greatest of games against Akhmat. It's not the easiest place to go, but it was really Pomazun that kept them in it for a lot of the game. He was Ural's man of the match by quite some distance. I think he made six saves, I think it was, in the end. And Akhmat finally got the win by Senin Sabay. Akhmat themselves, it was very much what you would expect from Talalayev's Akhmat, where they do admittedly give up more possession than they're used to. And it was only like 50, low 50s to Akhmat, high 40s Ural. But they just had a huge amount of shots on goal. It was like 20, I think it was 20, just over 20, 20 shots on Ural's goal by the end of the game. But what they really need to do for me is find some real clinical nature in front of goal. The build-up play was fine. The defence was absolutely solid. Semyonov and Lisov at the back were barely troubled whatsoever. Timofeyev controlled the game. Utkin had a real nice game as well. Just he only played an hour, and I don't think he was highly involved. But it was one of those performances where whenever he is involved, there was just a moment of quality. Like the very next touch was a real moment of quality. Kanate again, a bit like doing the Zabolotny job. I think he only completed like 8 passes or something during the course of the game, but was just real battling all the way through against Ural's back three. They just need to find some more, like I said, a clinical finish to the game. They had 20 shots on goal, only 6 on target. A lot of them ones on target were saves you would probably expect Pomazun to make. It was what impressed me, more about Pomazun's performance was how busy he was. There was a lot of crosses into the box to Kanate, as you would expect from Akhmat, but it wasn't the greatest of games. I think I'll be lying if I try to pull a wool over everyone's eyes in saying that. It was the lowest scoring game of the weekend in what was a very high scoring weekend in general. Before going back to yourself, Richard, for your last game to cover, it was this weekend of round 12, there was 32 goals in total. Just to compare, in round 10, there was only 10 goals in total from all 8 games. This is the joint highest since 32 goals again in RPL 2020-21 season. That was round 23 in March. The only time there was a round in which there was more goals scored, and that was the 35, again in round 23 in June 2020. As everyone might remember, that was the first COVID-interrupted season and involved a game when Sochi beat Rostov Kids 10-1. Though that final game of that weekend was actually replayed a month later due to Krasnodar's COVID crisis. So let's just say that in an actual weekend itself, this is the highest goal scoring for quite some time. But statistically, the highest since June 2020. So having said that, with the 32 goals from 8 games, it's typical that I decided to watch the one goal scoring goals in the game. But Richard, how did Dinamo play against Himki?
Yeah, after the disappointment of letting that 2-goal lead slip against Spartak, I think this was a nice riposte from Dinamo. They were 2-0 up at half time, and generally dominated the game. I think Himki have not been as good this season, and Igor Cherevchenko, unfortunately, recently lost his job due to some poor results. But I thought Dinamo played a really good game. Even though some of the results at home recently haven't been great, the disappointing losses to Krylia and to Nizhny, 2 promoted clubs. Dinamo have created a lot of chances this year against a lot of opponents. So I think at some point, if they got it right, then, they would gradually due to, really put someone to the sword, and they put Himki to the sword. Arsene Zakarian playing in this more deeper role in midfield in the free behind the attacking outlet, and he provided 3 assists, 2 of them from corners, admittedly, but again Dinamo proving that they're very good with these corners at the near post, because they got 2 goals from them through good deliveries at the near post. It's nice to see Chukavin continuing to score goals. Got to say, with Fyodor Smolov's current drop in form, Chukavin can get a few more goals before the international break starts. Wonder if there is a case for him. We'll get on to Spornau a bit later on. Wonder if there is maybe even a case for him starting up front, at least in one of the games, maybe against Cyprus. But yeah, it was a good performance from Dinamo, nice and comfortable. And then even more impressive that they backed it up in the midweek against Orenburg. Now, I have to admit, I was quite worried about them in this game, because obviously it was a Russian Cup match. They had to win to go through, and they were playing probably, you might say, arguably the best side in the Feniel in Orenburg. There's certainly a side who I would probably say are probably favourites to come top of the league, and it was away from home. But yeah, Dinamo completely just swept Orenburg aside. They made a few changes. But Igor Leshchuk back in goal. Sergei Parshavyuk came in at right back. Roman Yevgeniev came into the side instead of Ivan Ordets, and Kutitsky, the young defensive midfielder, came in. They rested a few players. Fomin was on the bench. Moro was on the bench. Simansky came back into the midfield. But yeah, still a very comfortable performance from them. They got an early goal through Konstantin Chukavin, another assist from Arsene Zakarian. And then Nikola Moro and Roman Yevgeniev wrapped it up late on with 2 late goals. I think they've gone through in the group stage with 9 goals scored in the 2 cup matches and 0 conceded. Dinamo, so very comfortable. Okay, you might say the game against Zenit was coming up 3 days afterwards, but they rested and rotated a little bit. Yaroslav Gladchev got some minutes up front as well. I think he came on against Himki as well. So Schwartz has used the squad quite a bit, and I'm really looking forward to the match against Zenit tomorrow. Be interesting to see the approach that they deploy. Given Zenit's recent switch in formation, I would not be surprised to see maybe Dinamo tell Moro and Fomin to maybe sit a bit deeper. I think they probably might play Zakarian in this deeper role against Zenit, to try and combat, Wendell and Barrios in midfield. Suspect they might tuck the fullbacks in quite tight as well. It's an interesting test for Dinamo, because I think they go into this game with nothing to lose. I think because they are underdogs, and Zenit are definitely favourites, and they confirmed that for the league, and they confirmed that with that dominant win over Spartak. But it'll be interesting to see what Dinamo do. I'm interested in the performance from Dinamo's point of view. Even if they lose just 2-1 or something, and show some fight. At least that puts them in a good stead for the rest of the season. And maybe those 5 drop points, maybe that will take the pressure off them a little bit. Because had they got those, had they held on against Spartak and got a win, and had they beaten one of Nizhny or Krylia at home, and were actually 2 points ahead of Zenit going into this game, maybe the pressure might have been more on them, because they would have been leading the table. But now maybe the pressure's off a little bit, because Zenit are ahead of them again. So be interesting to see what they can do. I'm really intrigued to see. I think it's a good barometer, this game, of just how far Schwartz has brought Dinamo. I think they've definitely improved a lot under him, but this is the real acid test now, how much. So yeah, this is a game that tomorrow evening I'm very much looking forward to watching, and yeah, it's a good barometer to see how much they've improved. But yeah, overall a good week from Dinamo overall, and hopefully a nice draw in the Russian Cup coming. And because it's a tournament they should definitely be looking to try and do well in. I think the league might be a bit of a stretch this year, but the cup certainly represents a chance for them to have a run, and with a favourable draw too, they could have a deep run in that. But yeah, good performance from them against Himki, and a good way to bounce back after the drop points against Spartak late on.
I must admit to everyone, we did mention Dinamo Himki last week very slightly, because we recorded on the Saturday. But to be honest, I just wanted to mention Dinamo again, because it's any excuse to discuss Arsene Zakarian, one of the bright lights of the game at the minute in Russia, and just how good he was last weekend. But yeah, I agree. Really looking forward to the game this weekend. I think that's arguably going to be the most intriguing and closest game so far. I think one of the by far the best team against one of the most interesting younger sides who are really performing well at the minute as well. Really, really looking forward to that. I was looking forward to Spartak Zenit, and then I remembered that Spartak are horrendous against Zenit. But this could be better. This could actually be a close match.
Just want to say as well, just want to come in and say as well, one last thing I will say about Dinamo is, and I was a bit sceptical when they bought him in the summer because I thought last season he was a bit hit and miss. Guillermo Varela has done very well at Dinamo. I saw that the goal that he did, the first goal that they scored against Rubin in their recent victory over Rubin, it was from his cross, and it was a good combination play on the right, I think, between him and Denis Makarov. And I've got to say, he stepped it up this year. I thought last season he was quite hit and miss, Varela, but, and I thought when they bought him, I thought, had he done enough to be bought permanently? But this season, I've got to say, I think he's been performing very well. He's got a good cross on him from that right side. So, yeah, I think he's one player who's also made strides forward this season. But yeah, Zakarian looks a terrific talent, and he has actually been linked in recent weeks, hasn't he, to some of the top clubs. I mean, I heard Man United and Barcelona, wasn't it? I mean, maybe that's probably a bit too far at this moment in time, but it's good to see that his performances and his breakthrough onto the scene is getting noticed, which is great for all of us to witness.
Yeah, certainly. Hopefully, it is getting noticed. I'm sure the scouts will know exactly how good he is. Potentially, early links to those stature of clubs are maybe a little bit of tabloid sensationalism from certain parts of the media. We all know exactly where I'm coming from, but hopefully it's a sign of things to come for Zaharian in general. Speaking of Zaharian, but moving on from Dinamo to the colours of the Sponaya team, Valeri Karpin midweek announced his latest. So I can't do this without laughing every single time. Right, so it's Valeri Karpin, for everyone who may not know, has put together a 41-man squad ahead of Russia's next international break. So to quickly mention the squad, by our estimates, I say by David's estimates, because David does all that, all the Twitter accounting. When you see any interesting facts, it's probably David's facts. Since being appointed as Russian national team manager, Valeri Karpin's called up 53 different players in just 3 squads. 10 goalkeepers have received a national team call-up since August 2021. Guilherme, Safanov, Dupin, Maximenko, Pesyakov, Lunyov, Kristyuk, Zhanayev, Lantratov, and now Haikin, the new guy. In the later squad, only Akhmat, Nizhny, and Arsenal Tula don't have a player in it from the RPL, and 4 of them are based from outside Russia. So to get all of that out the way, strap yourselves in for the next 45 minutes while I actually read the squad itself. So in goal, it's Guilherme, Zhanayev, Lantratov, Safanov, and Haikin. It's maiden call up for Lantratov and Haikin. He is Norway-based, plays for Bodo Glimt, who just beat Roma 6-1 in the Conference League. In defence, Arsen Adamov, and then Zhikia Deveyev, Karavayev, Klugovoy, Kudryashov, Osipenka, Samoshnikov, Sutorman, Terekov, and Chistyakov. That's a first call for Klugovoy, and the uncapped Adamov retains his place in the squad. In midfield, Akhmatov, Bakayev, Baranov, Glebov, Glushakov, Golovin, Yezhov, Yorokin, Zhamaletdinov, Zaharian, Zobnin, Yonov, Kazyayev, Maradashvili, Mostovoy, Mukin, Poloz, Fomin, and Chernikov. That's a debut call-up for Roman Yezhov, the Krylia winger, Locos, Konstantin Maradashvili, and Krasnodar's young midfielder, Alexander Chernikov. Don't know why Poloz is in their mind. And up front, Agalarov, Zabolotny, Sergeyev, Smolov, and Tyukovin. So Sergeyev is the only debut call-up in this group. Agalarov keeps his spot in the current extended squad as he remains the RPL top scorer. So 41-person extended squad. Obviously, it's going to be trimmed down. I think that's a given at this point, and everything must be prefaced with that. But Richard, have you genuinely ever seen a squad from any country in the world this big?
Generally, no. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, unlike any approach I've ever seen. Uh, I don't know why Karpin's doing it. I mean, is it announce his squad early, make it as big as possible, and then maybe that keeps the players on their toes, so that come when they has to trim it down, they've had a game, so he can assess their performances, and then trim it down based on that game. But it seems a strange one to me. Just announce the squad later and just call up a smaller squad. I've never known an approach like it. It's totally bizarre, James. I mean, we're all baffled by it, me, you, and David. We just can't get our heads around why he's doing it, and I don't get it. It gives the indication that it's like desperation. A man who doesn't really know what he's doing. Even though I will caveat the fact that it gives that impression. It's obviously based on the results so far, with an 80% win record and unbeaten so far as Sportnight manager. Karpin has got some good results, and he's done a good job so far. He's negotiated a potentially tricky situation that Cherchesov left for him. But yeah, just such a scattergun approach to it gives the impression that it's not really know what he's doing. I must admit, I'm not a fan of calling up so many players. I wish, just call up even if you're going to just call up an extended squad, make it 30, 32. I could understand that, and then trim 5 or 6 off for the final squad. But 41 players in a squad, it's too many, I think. But it's worked so far, so I'll reserve full judgment. But I think I'd prefer to see just a bit later announcement of the squad and just a normal squad called up from the start rather than big extended squads. But hey ho, there must be a method to the madness, even though it's it's unlike anything I've ever seen before.
If anyone's got any similar comparisons to size of squad from maybe the country you're from or whatever, give us a tweet, direct message, email, whatever, and let us know, because I'm genuinely interested in seeing any other form of international squad, even extended like this, obviously before the cut down, that is this big. It's pretty much incorporating, 53 players is pretty much incorporating almost everybody in the national pool who's like eligible and realistic. I can see some arguments. I've mentioned this before, how it's beneficial to give some players experience in the national setup, giving them some of the younger lads who are going to be there for some time, getting them bedded in early, giving them experience, even if it is just the training ground, just getting used to the regime of the flights back and forth, the lifestyle of being called up into international games and such. That I can see the benefit of this sort of big squad. I can see the benefit of Karpin wanting to get eyes on players, wanting to see them in training, even if it is only for a couple of weeks, not wanting to see them in video or for far away, but actual get up and close and work with them one-to-one. That I can understand as well. Wanting to give people a chance, totally understand. But what's strange is what, unless he's increasing the amount of coaches, which as far as I'm aware he's not, the problem is it's like teaching or in any sort of aspect of a mentor role. The more students you have, the more players you have, and the less coaches you have or teachers you have, the less one-on-one time each individual player gets, the less meaningful time they get to develop. It then just becomes not as important as a whole. One talented coach can do far more with a group of 20 players than a group of 40 players, because of that extra time, that extra intimacy. Like, it sounds like a silly way of saying it, intimacy. If there's a better word, let us know. But just that close development, the eye for detail, real getting into the nitty gritty of problems that they would face in the career, in the way they train at the club, being given new perspectives. That it's all aided by a higher ratio of coaches to players. The more coaches, the better. And that's true across the game. Why Iceland had their golden generation, it wasn't just a look of the draw that they had all of these players from the similar age groups hitting form at the same time, getting moves to big European clubs at the same time. A lot of that was done a long time ago by increasing the access to academies, increasing their access to pitches, and more importantly, reducing the costs of coaching badges and increasing the ratio of coaches to players in the country. So I can see part of what Karpin's trying to do here. The problem is that, it, like you said, Richard, it seems scattergun. He comes across as a man who doesn't quite know what he's doing. It's like taking 40 shots on goal. The probability is at least one of them is going to hit. At least one of them will go in. It's quantity over quality, it seems like. But again, I like what you said there, Richard, where the whole argument has to be caveated with, on the pitch, where it matters, he's doing very well. The results are there. Performances, maybe not, but it's a results-driven business, and the results most certainly are there, more so than any Russian manager in very late, at least in the short term. So it's all very just a bit odd. It's really hard to unpack, to be quite honest, Richard.
Yeah, it's odd, and in the last international break, I've got to say, Russia were not amazing in the last international break, but they got the results and they got the business done. And you have to say, considering it was only Karpin's, what was it, his fourth and fifth match as Spornaya manager, he got the results in two tricky environments against Slovakia, where the likes of Diveyev and Georgi Shakir at the back were rocks, absolutely outstanding. And then away at Slovenia, again, can be a difficult place to go. Not always easy, but, they went there and got the job done. The two upcoming matches are really intriguing because obviously Cyprus at home, they're obviously out of contention now, so you'd expect Russia to beat that home. You could call it the calm before the storm because then they have to go away and face Croatia, which is obviously a very tough match, even if Croatia aren't quite the force that they were 4 years ago when they reached the World Cup final. Although one thing I have seen with that Croatia game, which I find quite interesting, is it's actually been played in Split. And I do remember reading about Croatia because I was expecting that game to be played at the Maximia National Stadium in Zagreb, where Dinamo Zagreb play. And until England won the 5-1 in 2009 under Fabio Capello, I actually read that Croatia had a formidable home record at the Maximia Stadium. I think even countries like Italy went to play Croatia at the Maximia and didn't beat them. So I was really stunned to find that game being played in Split. I don't know whether there's a reason for it, but yeah, it's chaotic with the amount of call-ups that Karpin has done, but I'll give him his credit. Results on the pitch have been good, and Russia go into this upcoming international break with qualification for the World Cup in their own hands if they get 4 points in these two games. Win against Cyprus or draw against Croatia, they're through to the finals of the World Cup. So, yeah. It's in their hands, as chaotic as it sounds, and as scattergun as it sounds, Karpin has got the results. So, but yeah, looking forward to that Croatia game, especially.
Yeah, definitely. It all comes down to that one game, whether they can obviously win the group. It's an obvious thing to say, but in regards to Croatia playing in Split or not, they've actually moved around quite a bit during this qualifying campaign so far. If you look at some of Croatia's games, their 2-2 draw at home to Slovakia was in Osijek. The 3-0 win over Slovenia was played in Split again, and the recent 3-1 win against Scotland. No, not Scotland. Sorry, that was the bloody Euros. Before then, where was it? World Cup qualifiers. Back in March of 2021, they played Malta in Split as well. So they've been moving around a little bit, not just playing in Zagreb. I must admit, I'm not quite sure why either, Richard, but I like you, I am relieved that is the case. They're an absolute force in there, and anything that can make Russia's game even easier is the better. If we do move on, though, from the Spornaya team, and we'll quickly just finish up, a little bit of news. The Russian Cup took place midweek. The next round will have 9 RPL teams, 6 Finna L teams, and 1 Finna L2 team. The draw is to take place on the 2nd of November. Rather than go through the entirety of the results, because as people may remember, the first round is a groups, various of groups. The teams who are through are Zenit, Loko, Spartak, Sochi, Rubin, Dinamo, Arsenal, and Nizhny from the RPL. Alania, Yense, Baltika, Kuban, Kamaz, and Rota from the Finna L, and Chaika from the Finna L2. And just quickly before we do go, there's been a little bit of a controversy regarding a tweet by Eldor Shomurodov, of course, Uzbek striker, formerly of Rostov, in the wake of Australian footballer Josh Cavallo's coming out story. Whether or not this tweet is actually Shomurodov, it seems like it's more likely that it's not him. But it basically goes on to say that to denigrate people who are homosexual quite badly, and without reading it out, because it's disgusting language and a disgusting tweet, I'm not going to say go find it. I think the account has been suspended now. But it's just attacking the player after he made such a proud move, and a brilliant one at that by Cavallo. It's a shame that he has to be put in this position, but absolute credit to him, with hopefully started a little bit of a revolution with any luck. But it seems like people expect or think that this is more so a Shomurodov fan account. They did claim in a previous tweet last week that they are a fan, but do pretend to be Shomurodov, like they say, like the official athlete of Nike and Roma. Like it's faked or pretended to be real. With any luck, it's not. I don't think Shomurodov himself would be silly enough to air such views in public while it's such a high-profile club in Roma, who are very forward-thinking from a marketing perspective, but it did need to be addressed. And I hope that intelligence does prevail, and it shows that it was not the player himself, who's been in fine form again for Roma this season and one of the best RPL exports of the last few years. But with that, on a little bit of a sour note, unfortunately, that is the end of this week's podcast. As Richard did allude to earlier, this weekend we see the top teams clash as Zenit take on Dinamo. Elsewhere, Rubin CSKA, Spartak Rostov, Krasnodar Krylia, Nizhny Loko, Ufa Akhmat, Arsenal Sochi, and Himki Ural. But until then, this has been the Russian Football News Podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.